Hi, everybody. Welcome to Galaxy 2023. And today we have our security stream. So I'm really excited to be a part of this. If I just get my slide up here. Oops. There we go. Excellent. So welcome to GitHub Galaxy. My name is Niroshan Rajadare, and I'm the Senior Global Director of Sales for GitHub Advanced Security. We have an incredible lineup of leaders here to share their perspectives and experiences around securing development systems while optimizing productivity. First, a little bit of housekeeping. So if you have any questions, there's a Q&A panel on the top right-hand side of the session. Please feel free to go there and ask any questions. We have some moderators in there who will be more than happy to take those questions. And then we can pick out some interesting ones to bring into the forum if you have it for our panel. If you're having any difficulties with your browser, the recommended viewer that we have is Chrome. So please try that out if you're having challenges. And finally, if that doesn't work, there's a docs link inside the right-hand side panel. Please jump into that and see if there's anything else that could help you. Okay, so adopting the right approach to security reduces risk and allows teams to deploy quickly and securely. If you're wondering how you can remove technology debt and streamline DevOps processes, then you're at the right session. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the panel to introduce themselves. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Andra Lezza. Andra is a senior application security engineer at Checkout. It's lovely to have you on the panel today. Could you maybe... Thank you. Could you share with the audience a little bit about yourself?
Of course, yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Andra. I do application security for a payments company. And I also co-lead the OWASP London chapter, if anyone here has heard of OWASP before. My main focus in my day-to-day job is to implement and automate security best practices and tooling so that they're easily adapted to the way our 600 engineers or so work, and to support them at every step along the SDLC process.
Excellent. Thank you, Andra. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Next, we have Pascal Muller, Head of IT Application Development and Strategy at Deutsche Vermögensverwaltung. Hello, Pascal. Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with our audience today. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
First of all, thank you so much, Niroshan.
Excellent. Are you able to maybe share a little bit about your background, Pascal,
Yeah,
just
cool.
for the audience before we get started? Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, cool. Okay, cool. So first of all, thank you so much, Niroshan. It's such a pleasure to join you and be speaker here at GitHub Galaxy. So my name is Pascal Muller, and I'm Director of Application Development and IT Strategy here at Deutsche Vermögensberatung AG, short DVAG. As the development unit of DVAG, we build tools that enable our financial advisors to best serve their customers while offering this human touch that lies at the very core of our business, because they are very much focusing on the physical point of sale on a person-to-person basis. I'm responsible for teams working on IT strategy, tech projects, and the underlying architecture, as well as teams on classical development, QA, and our platform team, providing these teams with all necessary development tools and resources. Thanks for having me here today, and I'm looking forward to an exciting conversation.
Excellent. Thank you, Pascal. Thank you again for taking the time. And finally, we have Rob Boss. Rob is a GitHub trainer at Xspirit. If any of you have been fortunate to follow Rob on LinkedIn, you can see he's constantly sharing trainings and thoughts with the community from his experience working with our customers. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Niroshan. Thank you for inviting me over.
Our pleasure. Thank you. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, with that introduction, I share a lot of these things indeed online. I've got a couple of LinkedIn learning courses, one on advanced security, so I'm a little bit biased about the product. But that's also because I just like what we're doing there together with GitHub. As we said, I work at Spirit. We're a GitHub partner, so I'm really focused on doing the things with GitHub as well. But I like the notion that we have there of developer first, and we bring everything there and try to do everything in a rounded way. So from that, I started giving a lot of training because I see that a lot of people need that help to get that knowledge over to the actual engineers who do things for us. And it's always nice that somebody higher up says we need to focus on security, but then how can you actually do that? So that's what I do. I help customers getting into the DevOps mindset and making things more secure. And from that, all of the training and sharing evolved. So yeah, happy to be here.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing, Rob. It's really beneficial for all of us. I understand there was a little bit of a technical hitch when we were introducing Andra. So perhaps, Andra, you could share again for our audience a little bit about yourself and your expertise, please.
Sure. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Everything good? Okay. Thank you so much. Sorry. The joys of starting first, huh? So hi everyone again. Okay, thank you for inviting me, by the way. So I was saying that I do application security for a payments company. I focus mainly on automating security and best practices and working with about 600 engineers or so in our company to adapt security to the way they work so that it easily supports them at every step of the SDLC process. And I also lead the OWASP London chapter along with 2 other very nice leaders on our side. I hope this one was okay.
That was great.
Thank you.
That OWASP chapter, just a small little thing that we're doing. So
yeah, tiny organization.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Okay, so now that we've heard about our panelists, we would love to learn a little bit about our audience. And this is really going to help us in our conversation today, just focus a little bit about how we provide our responses. So to begin with, the first question that we'd like to understand from all of you at home, and the polls will open up in a moment, is which organization do you belong to? Are you in the development team? Are you in the security team? Or are you part of the DevSecOps team? So if I stop sharing, if you can open the poll, please, Quinton. If you're looking for the polls, it is a tab on the right-hand side where the chat is. So I see the votes coming in. Excellent. We'll give it another 10 seconds. Wow, this is like election night. It's so exciting. Wow, look at this. We have a big audience as well. I'm really excited to see this. Awesome. So maybe, Quinton, if you could maybe bring the poll up to the screen, we can just share with our audience so that we can see, wow, look at that. So the predominant part of our audience are developers. It's great to see developers caring about security and learning how you can bring security into your code faster. So that's really amazing. Thank you. Thank you all for joining. We have the DevSecOps and infrastructure teams here as well, and a few security people too. So thank you very much. This really helps us with the flavor of the discussion that we'll have today. The next thing I would like to do, so the next question I have is, let me share my screen again here, is what, I'll just wait for this to come up. Okay, what is the top AppSec or application security pain point in your organization that you want to learn about? And how other organizations have solved for today. Okay, so we'll give that a moment. Just watching here. There we go. Excellent. Oh, wow. I'm starting to see a dominant leader here. Look at that. Almost 50% difficult integration into the developer workflow. So developer experience really does matter. So that's amazing. Wow.
Of course, we do have a lot of developers here, so maybe this is a bit skewed, right?
Well, this is the opportunity to skew the mindsets at GitHub too. So there you go. But no, I mean, this is very interesting. Excellent. We'll just give it 5 more seconds, and then we can jump to the next one. Okay, so if I can take the share back, thanks, Quinton. Excellent. All right. And so then the last question that we have is, what is the most important KPI when thinking about application security? And this is a multiple choice question, so you can choose multiple answers here. Okay, mean time to remediate. I love that. Actually, it's really interesting as we look at these results here. I mean, one of the founding principles of GitHub Advanced Security was, where we wanted to focus our attention. And one of the things that we used to say is that, in the industry, when we launched Advanced Security, there wasn't an information problem. Like, you have more than enough information around like all the kinds of problems that you have in your code. We have a remediation problem. Like, we need to fix things. So it's really interesting to see that remediation is also a priority here for the audience. So thank you for that. Great. Okay. So without further ado, let's kick on here. I think we have a lot to get through and a very strong panel. Excellent. Okay. So just for our agenda here. So, thank you, first of all, for sharing all that information with us from the audience. It really helps us focus our attention. So I'm really grateful for our panelists taking the time today to share how they optimize their security practices by focusing on the developer experience. And I think that's really in tune with the background that all of you have in this session, and also what you've all kind of indicated are your priorities as well. For our goal today, for all of you watching it, is for you to come away with an understanding of how to focus key strategic priorities using a developer-first security approach, like securing open source, pipelines, and preventing security issues. We'll do this by touching on 3 core topics. So the first one is understanding our panelists' top challenges in securing software. The next one will be exploring how they leverage this to address regulatory requirements. And then finally, most importantly, do all of these things while keeping developers productive, which again, really resonates with what you had all highlighted. And then at the end of this, we'll have some time to take some questions from the audience. And depending on timing, we'll also try and bring some of those while we're in the topic. So please feel free to ask away. And as I mentioned, we have our moderators there to try and help in working through those questions in real time too. Okay, so let's begin with our first topic. So our panelists represent a range of industries. However, since most companies today are software companies, either developing their own or leveraging third-party software to do business, let's start our conversation with software security and how you balance developer productivity with security. So maybe Pascal, if you could take the lead here for us. The first question that we want to explore is, what would you say have been the top challenges when securing your software at DV?
Yeah, very good question, Yushan. So when I started my current role, as I said 2.5 years ago, our top challenges from a management perspective was, first of all, to efficiently coordinate the teams across the whole company. And regarding software security, we're definitely to find a broadly overarching security level and sustain it across all our distributed development teams. So as a company that provides solutions to both the financial advisors and their private clients through our more or less platform B2B2C model, we have multiple development teams and also related development teams of our partners building unique solutions for each layer of the business. So while this approach offered teams in the past self-sufficiency and ensured that each stakeholder enjoyed the best user experience possible, it had also led to a lot of inefficiencies. So not to say that things were not working, don't get me wrong on that, but the team's infrastructure choices and practices were as individualized as their solutions. So they often built from scratch instead of reusing code, and each team handled the maintenance and security of their own tech stacks. So for example, teams running Jenkins alongside Bitbucket had to not only maintain the software, but also operate the servers and handle disaster recovery which in the end took their focus away from building cool stuff for our customers.
No, sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, but we have overcome those challenges, not completely, but I think we made the most important step. So after having spent some time in the beginning, as I said, analyzing the situation and evaluating organizational concepts, and also the unexpected visit of the Log4j security vulnerability at the end of 2021, we decided together with our lead developers and our cloud team, and we just founded at that point of time, to largely standardize and streamline our way of software development across large parts of the application landscape and also large part of our development team. So in order to move forward with this endeavor effectively and as fast as possible, we have opted for a very centralized approach. So we transformed our newly founded cloud team then to a platform team, as we call it, that centralized its bundled services like provisioning, cloud services, also Kubernetes, source control, CI/CD workflows, testing tools, and other development tools. And then, yeah, transformed them and have centralized as a central service provider for developer units throughout the whole DVAG. And this allows us, or allows our teams to focus on application development more instead of this maintenance and operations. So, and from this point on, the comprehensive expansion of these central services, both in breadth and in depth, has been our most important lever for optimizing our recent application development, also regarding security. So the centralized approach goes so far that the platform team centrally defines the delivery of development tools, such as CI/CD workflows, and then ensures the use of these standards across the company. And coming from this standard approach, in order to prevent these standards from becoming too rigid and old-fashioned, so we continuously work on them and develop them. The platform team and our lead developers regularly exchange information regarding adjustments and further developments. And also some tech enthusiasts, so our tech nuts, who are not among the lead developers, are also in exchange with the platform team in order to contribute. So, and especially in the testing field, for example, we have so-called champions who are permanently tugging at the existing standard in a positive sense, meaning like for that we reduced the amount of our testing tools significantly, but pushed for better overall integration.
Yeah, no, that's great, Pascal. I mean, a couple of things that I would pick out there is when you kind of spoke about, you know, how individuals or teams were going off and building their own capabilities. You know, we often talk about the fragmentation and lack of ability to share as like, you know, like a lack of inner source strategy. So it sounds like by moving the business to a best of suite, which is broadly applicable for everyone, you're creating an environment where everyone can contribute with each other. They can be productive very quickly. And that, you know, really does contribute to, you know, developer velocity, which is a key reason why people look at the platform. So, you know, that's really interesting. And I also love how you've taken those technical champions and brought them in as part of the process of building a best of suite ecosystem. So that's super valuable for sharing that. Thank you. Andra, how about yourself at checkout? We'd love to hear your perspective here.
Sure. We've seen two main topics in our engineering space. One of them, I call it an opportunity rather than a challenge, and it's quite similar to what Pascal mentioned just now, which is learning how different teams approach development and adapt security to the way they work instead of forcing security on top of what they do. So we've looked at their processes, their platforms, but then we also tried to make it as easy for them to secure so that we could scan code and track findings in a fairly centralized manner. So you can all go and do what you want, but it's, GitHub Advanced Security is really easily automatable. So it's been really interesting to look at how we can bring those different ways of writing code and scanning code and looking at findings in a central place. But an actual challenge, at least on my side, is the continuous struggle to prioritize between developing and delivering features, but also fixing findings and keeping security up to date. So yeah, we've done that through constant collaboration and feedback from engineering teams. We also have a security champions group. But yeah, a big part there is the constant collaboration. Without communicating with engineers and working together with them, we wouldn't be able to overcome these challenges.
That's amazing, Andra. I mean, when we started, selling GitHub Advanced Security or building out this capability, one of the common themes that we used to hear from a lot of customers is this concept of like the DevSec divide, where you had development teams and security teams, and there was constant friction. And I think the key theme that I'm picking out between, the conversation that Pascal and I had and what you're sharing here is, developers need to be a part of this journey of securing the software. It's not a sort of like, here's a set of tools, like go do. It's like, hey, we think you're improving this environment. We want you to be a part of this process. And I think that's really inspirational to hear that, that mindset and then the subsequent results of taking that mindset, So thank you for that. So Rob, now you have a very different perspective because you're kind of from the outside looking in, but then also being like the whisperer, if we would say like the security whisperer within these organizations. So from your perspective, I'd love to kind of understand, the top challenges that you see across your customers and then how you're helping them kind of work through that as they try and secure their software.
Yeah. Now, for me, it always starts with awareness, both from management side and from engineers, and how can you bridge that gap in between? I've seen companies that say, we now need to be more secure. Well, that's nice. It's not something you do with the press of a button, so you really need to invest something there. And even worse, management then says, we need to be more secure, and the developers have no idea how to do this. So bridging that gap, so that starts for me with awareness, but then it usually comes back to that mindset of we still need to teach people we are building applications, and it's very easily to make them vulnerable to certain things. I always say we still need to educate people on the OWASP top 10. For us, it's a given thing. We know about it for years, but I still encounter companies where engineers have no clue how that works because it often is not a part of the education curriculum that they had to become an engineer. So bridging that gap, it starts with the awareness then. And as soon as they're aware, you can talk about mindset and how can we get there. And then bridging that gap somehow between management and the execution, which is at the engineer side. How can we become more secure? What does it mean to become more secure? Does that mean we're more in control? Usually you see that at customers that, especially in well-regulated industries, they have auditors coming by, and what you then see is something we're very good at as humans is the auditor comes by, so we're getting more and more secure, and then the auditor leaves, and we're getting less and less secure. And that cycle continues over years. So trying to break that with mindset of we need to ingrain this in everything we do, that is one of the challenges that I usually have. And that's also the companies that I join, of course, because of my expertise. They start asking questions of, hey, how can we get there? And I always try to explain, it's not something you can just willy-nilly enable for everybody and say, we're now more secure. No, you really have that mindset and buy-in of, we actually can allocate time to spend on this to fix these things. One of the most effective things that I've seen companies do is really say 10% of our time, we really want to invest in technical debt. And that 10% is really very a high standard that they try to make sure first before they focus on features alone. So we really need to carve out that part of the time that the engineers have to really spend on security topics as well.
No, that's excellent. And I mean, for people who are listening at home, Rob, where, we had Log4j, like today, if you look at it, they say like 80% of web application data breaches are caused by credential leakages, right? So it's a very simple concept. There's a plain text password that's publicly facing or like exposed. And so we see like really strong boardroom visibility in a topic like that. When you have that kind of top-down motion happening in a business, what would be like 2 or 3 things that you would say to a dev team and a security team in terms of like actioning and not being too draconian, but actually creating a constructive workflow? Do you have like maybe a couple of thoughts on that, just based on your experience?
For me, again, it's awareness. Educate people first. It's not something you can enable. They need to learn about it, start embracing it, and want to enable it by themselves. That's usually the way that I go in, because that's a softer approach. And then you can still say, we'll take this forward for the next 6 months, but then it becomes mandatory. Similar to what we see with secret scanning, for example, you could enable push protection on day one and say we are now more secure, but that will break the developer flow. And if they're not aware of certain things, then they probably will be angry because you're preventing them from pushing their work back to a server. So we turn that around and we say, first, we start educating people. This is how easy it is to leak a secret out into the open. And what is then the blast radius of what you can do with that secret. Then you show secret scanning and how that works. And then you start talking about push protection. But it's weird. This stuff is now so good that the technology that we have, that I'm regularly just pasting my personal access token into issues now these days, just to demo people of how easy this is and how easily it works. And especially me going from the community side, this stuff is enabled by default for public repositories. So especially in the open source community, it's a no-brainer to have these things enabled as well. So that's usually the flow that we have there. Especially for companies, have that conversation, have those workshops, and explain to people this is why we're doing this as well. And we really want to prevent ourselves and our companies from becoming in the news because we have leaked our S3 bucket API key, for example. We all know that is the dumbest thing to do, but it is super easy to get to that point. It still happens to me in my own source code as well, and I'm a trainer on these things. So we're all humans, and that's why we need some help of some computers to help us prevent from getting there.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. So, I mean, I love how you touch on that partnership and kind of like working through and educating the developers and helping them understand the value of what's coming in. Andra, there was actually a question from the panel, which was around, what's your recommendation to model security champions? And it would be interesting to understand that from a perspective of like centralized teams and distributed teams. And maybe Pascal, you can follow after Andra, because I know you also have a similar concept.
Sure, thank you. That's actually a really good question and something I've been trying to improve over the last 3 years or so, creating security champions programs in various roles. I think a distributed team of champions seems to work the best. So we have about 40 of them in checkout right now. And in a setting like this, you always have people that are really passionate about security and want to be there and come up with ideas and initiatives on their own of what to improve. They come up with things that are going wrong in their code, and they ask for advice on how to fix them, how to roll out various tools. But you also have the people who have kind of been voluntold to be there, which creates a very interesting dynamic. So a distributed team and maybe something like a security champions maturity model would help. So, different tiers of security champions, they each have different interests. So this might help motivate people. And actually something that's connected to what Rob was saying and the awareness, make it competitive. Show the numbers, show the data. This is how many secrets you have, or this is how many findings you have. If there's a team with a lot of critical findings, we tend to see that they action these things quite fast, and they don't want to be the first ones when it comes to this. So just create the competitiveness amongst developers, because we've got a lot on the call, but you guys really like it, so that helps security as well.
To add to that, what I usually also do is use the numbers that we have on the organization level to find the laggards and have an extra discussion with them. Can I provide you with something? Do we have an extra workshop? Can we bring in one of those champions to help you with this temporarily? Add them to the team for a month, a day in a week, for example, just to give that more momentum. And that can really help as well, because recently I enabled Dependabot on 1,100 repositories. And then you see, for example, people not acting on it for a month. So you need to have a conversation again of what is holding you back. Did we not introduce things right enough? Do you lack time? Is there not enough momentum from the management, for example? Do we have buy-in? So those numbers of tracking where we are right now, usually we want to have less instead of just 0. Tracking that and making that visible to people as well, that can really help indeed.
Yeah, and that's from organization.
Pascal, I want to add a flavor to this question because there was something interesting that came in just after this. So the security champions is important, but the other part was, and I think you can tie this together based on the prior chats that we had, is, someone in the chat kind of said like, hey, I have all these development tools in my ecosystem. I'm trying to transform that ecosystem. And so their question is like, so changing the development mindset to think from a perspective of security from the design point of view can be a big challenge. What are the practices that you suggest creating this culture change, starting from design and not just relying on automated processes? And this really resonates with the conversation that we had a few days ago. So I wanted you to maybe bring those two together as part of our conversation here.
Yes, so from organizational standpoint, so I'm totally with Rob and Andra that you really need to stress this awareness point. But on the other side, what we always learn is that you also have to stress and to bring the standard and to communicate the standard and to do things that are hard for the teams. Usually we say you have to do them more often and quick. This stuff together as a whole company, and from what we see is that, especially as Rob mentioned as well, these hits on Dependabot in the beginning, they're quite frustrating for all the teams. If you really see like the whole amount of truth that lies in your repositories at all, but on the other side, as a management, you have to be fair and to speak with the teams directly to give them the space to work on this thing. Right now, we're also in a process to find how much space you allocate in your time to really work on this stuff, and we try to anchor this in our OKRs that we have for my whole resort to really get this stuff going and to not just push the teams, but to really do this on a level playing field. And from an organizational standpoint, what we have learned with this centralized approach is, from a friend, I know this African saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So, and for what we see there is we have this centralized expert approach with this platform team, where we say, like things for Copilot or for code spaces, new things that you announced later, and X the same thing. We have playgrounds there and people really work on this stuff. And then on the next thing, we have this board with our lead developers, where the platform team starts this discussion about new features and how to implement them and if they make sense for the teams. And that is really where you see that on the one hand, we as a bigger organization, we have this privilege to go fast as we can test new stuff, try new things, and then on the other side we go with lead developers, and in this board you can also, people can to volunteer and say, okay, we have room to try this as a first development team, let's start this together, and then they do it. And if you see that it works, especially code spaces is a very good example where you see, okay, look, there are a lot of efficiency in this, but on the other side, developers are a bit, then I can't work in VS Code, and that is what I've done for all my life, or for a big part of this. And then you can really see, okay, let's try this out with one team, then this team come back and the lead developers come back and talk about their experiences, and then you can spread it. And I think it's also another approach if other lead developers hear it from their peer lead developers that it's working, instead of the centralized organization that then say, okay, we have to do it. So I think it's also about processes and a very effective approach to it, that on the one side stresses that you really do it, and on the other side give the freedom to really work together on this.
Thank you, Pascal. And I love that quote. I'm going to use it all the time. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I think that is an inspirational quote, and I think definitely hits the nail on the head in what we're doing in this journey. So let's move to the next question now. So let me just bring up my screen here for all of you. So So we had a really good discussion, and I'd like to move a little bit towards the compliance and the regulatory side. So compliance standards have evolved dramatically in recent years. And this is something, Andra, you would know very closely, being part of the OWASP London chapter. So shifting away from the checkbox standards to objective-based policies is a journey that we've been making. And this has significantly affected many organizations' approach to security. So Andra, maybe if you can lead us off on this discussion here, just as a starting point, what regulatory requirements does your company adhere to? And how does GitHub Advanced Security help you accomplish this?
Sure. So we are, I think the correct phrase is a tier 1 PCI service provider. So as the name suggests, the main regulatory body that we have to respond to is the PCI, our PCI people. So that standard is a really important one to us. We have many others as well, and we also have a few very specific requirements internally. So we try to keep the code we produce really, really secure. In terms of how GitHub helps, at least from my perspective, from application security, it's really, really good to see and have a clear view of the security of our code, so the status at any point in time. So visibility and remediation options, having all the information that we need for engineers, from commits all the way to PR merges, very clear, really, really helps. And yeah, just having this one place for security, from everything from code scanning, so SAST, to dependencies, to secret scanning. Yeah, great dev-friendly way to keep up with what's happening in our code base.
Well, that's excellent. So, I mean, having that visibility and being there as every step of the developer workflow is really, really great to hear. You mentioned a few things, but I'm curious, you hadn't mentioned software bill of materials. Is that something that's important at checkout today, or from like the regulatory standards that you have to adhere to?
I think it is, yeah. That's something I'm currently working on. So trying to introduce Dependabot such that it's not a very scary thing to look at. It's obviously going to be very noisy. So just as Rob said, it's a journey to make these things clear and to create the awareness around dependencies and what SBOMs are and how to tackle security issues there.
Excellent, thank you. Rob, how about yourself?
I'm not necessarily in a regulatory industry, but I do help customers with that. And for me, usually the focus starts with, it's nice that we have those audits as well, but we need to mainly show to those auditors that we're in control of things. So bringing it back to dashboards of where are we right now in our process, where are our dark spots, where can we help, and then finding back the teams of where do we need the most help or most visibility, just to show that you're in control of these things. And as we said a couple of times now, it's a journey, so you need to take people along to that journey of saying, hey, we want to improve. We're not there yet. This is the stance right now. These are our most critical applications that we have running, for example. Those 5 have been handled, so we're in control for that, and we're focusing our control now to the backend systems, for example, something like that. So usually for me, I go in that route, focusing and make sure that we are in control and helping from there. And one of the main things there usually to start is indeed secret scanning, because then you can at least say we're in control of that part, and we've tried our best to prevent secrets being leaked out into the public, because that is usually what you see in the news as well. Mm-hmm. That's where the main attack vector starts, because it's too easy.
In the conversations that you have with customers, is there, like, if we were to say, like, are there like 2 or 3 elements that a playbook for getting, security baked into the development process? Is there like something that you could share with the audience, like if they would like try and think about this?
Yeah, I think I can. It starts with awareness. So having those sessions internally, share what is the problem even that we're trying to fix, because sometimes you don't even have that. I've seen plenty of teams even struggling of keeping their dependencies up to date. Usually you rely then on a senior who every once in a while thinks, maybe we should upgrade. But that can then be painful if you don't do it often enough. It's the whole devil's mantra again. If it hurts, do it more often. We need to guide those teams in there as well, saying this is something we need to do. We've all read the news. We've talked about Log4j. We've seen SolariGate. We want to prevent our company from becoming the next headline in there. And that is where we have these tools. So that is the awareness part. Then having the workshops of actually enabling that on their repositories to see what the impact actually is. Depending on what you have in there, it can be almost no impact to a lot of impact. Discuss with them best practices of how can you make sure that it's not too noisy, that you can have a gradual rollout to the team, and at least make the decision of rolling it out something of a team decision. And then you'll see there are more mature teams are already there, and they can enable just everything in a week. But some other teams just need to do this more granularly. And do that together with those champions, I would say. Those will probably be your biggest proponents that can help you get the message over across. Because that is indeed their peers. I can usually say that as a consultant because I'm coming from external. And then sometimes you get that pushback of saying, yeah, sure, you're the consultant, we hired you for this, but I'm doing it differently. If you can bring that to peers, and usually the people with the biggest mouth saying this will not work, it's way too noisy, you can really turn them around and saying you are now the champions and bring it over to your side. Mm-hmm. That usually really works because they have the knowledge to say the reason why things aren't working. So if you can help them, guide them through the process and show them that it can be done, and yes, for some ecosystems it can be harder than for others, they can become the beacons of knowledge internally, and that's why we call them champions, and say take that role and you do the workshops with those teams, because that works way better than we have somebody centrally doing that, for example. So those are usually the steps: awareness, bringing that to the teams, try to get your biggest opponents on board and make them your champions, and then start tracking the journey, see where you are, because it's nice to say we need to be more secure, but it also comes with what does that mean? How can we measure that and go from there?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, as we think about, like when I was a developer, and when we tried to bring about change, change is good, and change is an opportunity for leadership. So if you're a developer and you're trying to bring change, but improve how your company builds software, being a leader and bringing this back to the teams, I think is a great opportunity to develop yourself. So I think that's, an interesting tidbit that I picked out from what you were saying there among those 3 steps. And Pascal, how about for yourself? Because I know like regulatory compliance isn't a key part of the business, but it is like, more broadly. So if you could talk to us about that.
Yeah, correct. So the products sold by our financial advisors are predominantly from partners in the financial sector, namely insurances or banks. And regulations from these industries generally affect us only indirectly or relate to the more content-related and functional advisory aspect, like for example, in the form of prescribed process steps or ensuring that certain fact sheets are read or signatures are obtained or stuff like this. And for the core business of our company as a pure sales company, there are only a few regulatory requirements that relate directly and explicitly to us and play a role for us in technology. Notwithstanding this background, the issue of data privacy and general IT security is of course an immensely important topic for our around 8 million private customers. And as a service provider for our financial advisors, we are more or less the guardian of the confidentiality of the personal data entrusted to them and by them to us. So it's up to us to always incorporate the best solutions to keep the entrusted data safe and keep auditors happy. So where GitHub features help us there is regarding like full traceability of code adjustments with appropriate documentation, and as well as ensuring 4 eyes principle for such changes that are more on the general, very low part. And in the same context, we are big fans of secret scanning and push protection, which help our team avoid accidentally leaking credentials, what has already been said. So yeah, well, it's the same thing.
Excellent. Thank you, Pascal. So as part of like baking security into the development process, there was a question from the audience around, are you providing incentives to product owners and subject matter experts to support the security efforts by the teams? Maybe Pascal, you could start there, because obviously you don't have the big sledgehammer of a regulatory compliance. So I'd be curious to see how you do that.
So how we do that, and that I see that we are on a very, or at least from my standpoint, on a very good way. We do it with OKRs, as I already mentioned. So these OKRs, we decide on them usually late in the year. So, and then for the next year. So I think in autumn or winter. Last year we decided with the whole team and with the whole management, like from the heads, from the team leads, together we came and we're discussing about really pushing big things on the whole development team level. Things like testing things, test case usage and stuff like unit test stuff, and really see that we get an overarching objective on this thing, and then align and talk about how each team comes to play in this thing. And then we measure this on a quarterly basis, but in the end we come together on a half year basis and see where we are. But I think it's also on this I would say pull motivation that we more or less talk about. Look, we want to push things like getting hits on the PandaBot to a significantly lower level, or raise our test coverage. So, and then more or less everyone, and to be honest, that is what I mentioned earlier, you have to be fair to your teams. You cannot come in March and say, okay, look, we want to get the PandaBot hits down, do something about it, as Rob also mentioned, and just do it in 2 months, and then we see where we are. But we want to come there with a really overarching level and see, especially with test coverage, we really raise the bar significantly. And what you see, and that's the great thing about OKRs, is that you usually, if you really want to raise the bar for the whole organization, you cannot really, I would say, experience this 10% optimization because everyone is in his or her team, and you cannot see how you overall really improved as an organization. And that's the cool thing about OKRs. So you can really see in the end of the year that every team as part of this whole resort really pushed the level, and you have then like 20% optimization and stuff like this. And otherwise, at least from my perspective, you wouldn't have identified this really approach that is significantly, but for each team perhaps not in the way that it can be really experienced.
Excellent. Thank you. Rob, I mean, more generally for yourself, like as that whisperer role that you play in organizations, are there kind of carrots that you're working with the teams to put in front of these subject matter experts or product leads in following the best practices?
Yeah, it sort of ties back to what Pascal said. Number one, share the data with them because they're part of the solution. Don't see them as a problem. They're part of the solution of getting to a better state. Just be open and honest about it, but usually focus on the team itself and not necessarily compare them to other teams. For example, this is where you are right now. I think you want to improve. Probably you agree, and then go from there. And make the ones who are making the biggest strides there part of the knowledge sharing internally. Make them part of those championships as well. What we usually try to do at companies is make sure that you have regular knowledge sharing sessions and bring those folks into that as well. Saying, hey, you have gotten this to work. Can you share where you started? Can you share where you are right now? What were your biggest takeaways? How did you improve on this setup? Because then they can get that ball rolling internally. So it's a snowflake that goes out then and becomes bigger and bigger. Make them part of it. And you can see that in the chat, even people are really already looking for, I want to have a badge saying I'm doing some best practices for following security, for example. I already answered somebody to have a look, for example, at the Open Source Security Foundation and the work that they're doing for open source there. They have a badge, for example, that says, I do have a static application security scan tool installed in my repository. We do things with pull requests, for example. Have an internal set of standards of saying, this is the way we want to work, and start measuring your teams and your repositories against that as well. That way you can give them a big carrot, which is the badge that they can wear with pride indeed.
Yeah, that's excellent, Rob. I mean, there are even some areas that we're looking at here at GitHub around even actions workflows and like trying to provide some guidance on, do these actions workflows that are in the community have like a secret scanning tool, a software composition analysis tool, or a SAS tool enabled, and that helps organizations like yourself reuse these workflows inside your organization with more confidence.
Yep.
And maybe Andra, just to close us out on this topic, your thoughts here on how to motivate?
Most of what I do is work with security champions. It's mainly to try and scale because I'm the only application security here. So their help and their buy-in is really, really important. When it comes to carrots, I try to organize events throughout the year and involve the security champions, like capture the flag events or mini conferences within the company. And at all of these events, we celebrate the people that have come up with ideas, that have engaged with the larger InfoSec team and have contributed with this, nuggets of knowledge throughout the year. So yeah, that makes them really happy and competitive still.
That's excellent. So empowering your thought leaders and celebrating thought leadership. That's excellent. Okay, so let's go to the next topic because I know we are starting to come close on time too. So, and I think this one is probably near and dear to a lot of the people in the audiences based on what the survey said. So developer productivity is top of mind as we navigate changing macroeconomic factors and organizations are attempting to maximize the value they bring to the market. Rob, maybe you can kind of lead us through this question here. So, how have you helped organizations prioritize the developer experience?
Yeah, it goes back to the realization of we need to be secure and compliant all the time, and not only when the auditor will be coming by in the next 2 months. So it needs to be in that developer flow because they're the people who can actually fix these things. So include them into the solution there as well. They can help with these things and improve them. And you do that by focusing relentlessly on the developer experience. How do you work as a team? Can you work asynchronously in a good way? What is the moment in time that we can run the most time-expensive security checks, for example? Do we really need to run everything we have on push and prevent you of doing something? Or can we wait until you're ready and you say, I want to grab something to drink in between? We know that people are working more and more from home, so they really want to focus on getting things done as well. And figuring out what works best in their flow. So for me, the pull request experience is really one of the biggest ones because that is the moment in time where you say, I'm sort of done. I want to have a review from somebody else just to make sure that I'm not doing weird things in here. And that is the place where you have plenty of time. So focusing really on the developer experience of where can we inject these small things that we can add to them and what will be the result of that. Similar to what we said before, if you start with enabling push protection with secret scanning, you are blocking their work because probably they have something that they want to push back to the central location in one go at the end of the day, for example. And that would be a struggle then. You're blocking them of doing certain things. So if you turn it around and gradually go in that direction and say, yes, in 6 months, we will enable push protection on everything. But we are going to start first with having the conversation, making sure that we can do these things. It's sort of also the shift left movement that we have on the DevOps side, of course. How early can we do certain things? But you cannot shift left all the way. There needs to be a common place where you say, this is where it makes sense to do certain things.
Yeah. I love that. So one of my favorite sayings is, how do you eat a cake? And it's, well, depending on if it's one of my children, it should be piece by piece, right? And I think, exactly to your point, it's just piece by piece, working through that process and slowly getting it in there. So that was awesome. Andra, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I'll continue from what you said, Rob, because that makes a lot of sense with what I'm working on right now. I'm trying to develop a secure SDLC standard, which is, like a big title, but it basically describes the way our engineers develop code. And the most important thing there for me is to enable them to self-service, to have all the tools at their disposal to choose the simplest way to write secure code. And when it comes to GitHub and GitHub Advanced Security, the best thing that I've encountered so far is the number of integrations. So when you want to scan, when you want to have all those results in one place, that security tab with the drop down of all the tools where you can see your scan results, that's amazing. So yeah, enabling them to not need us as much as in other companies.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, so just prioritizing the developer experience, having that single pane of glass. I mean, there's a data point that I had read about before where it says like every time you pull a developer out of their productive workflow and send them somewhere else, or like go to this tool or that tool to go and understand what's happening, it takes them something like 23 minutes to get back into that peak productive mindset. So if you can bring information where they are, then this is really empowering for them, right? And we've been through this journey already, because when I was a developer 20 years ago, it was like failed builds, right? And you would like kick off the build, and then like a week later, someone would run all the builds and go, oh, the build's broken, right? How do we get that like to you faster as part of your workflow? And so that's how CI/CD started. And then it was testing, and now it's security, but it's keeping it all in the same pane of glass. So that's amazing.
And especially with the way that we work right now, we work from home usually, at least most of the time I do this from home these days. And I want to be in control of my own calendar there, of when am I doing certain things productively. And I block an hour off for something and I want to focus on something there. And please don't interrupt me during that time, because I'm really deep into the matter. If you pull me out of it, it will take me a lot of time to get back in it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Pascal, how about yourself?
Yeah, I know these things, especially also when I started, there was a lot of workload for our developers and the teams about permissions and approval from team leads and stuff like this, where you wanted to have some stuff, and that was also so tiring. And as Andra said, so for us in general here at Deutsche Vermögensberatung, it's very, developer experience is a very essential aspect for me and the leadership team. But it's also important that we fill it with tangible content, so it doesn't degenerate into a buzzword like others in the past, meaning DevOps sometimes. Yeah, just as an example. So for us, as you already said, the context starts there where individual developers are often so packed with work on projects that it's often challenging or even impossible to take into account all the aspects required to develop outstanding software regarding various technologies, languages, frameworks, as well as the usual mix of all these together. So, and coming from there, it's all about simplifying the work of our development teams. But by defragment, you said it before, like really by defragment the provided tool landscape and make the usage as intuitive as possible. And Andra, you also mentioned it. We also started a self-service portal for our developers, where in the beginning, like a lot of the common managers were totally shocked because developers could ask for cloud resources without any approval or permission, stuff like this. But on the other side, we especially in the whole Azure context, we made it very transparent to the teams what they are using in a month's time, and sometimes teams look at this report and say, what these are the costs. If we can do it way cheaper, if we would have known about the costs and stuff like this. So this is also one thing. And on the other side, where I see it, we use GitHub with its numerous features with the intention or the approach of not disclosing errors made and naming person responsible in an awkward way. But when we use such comprehensive tools, we are more concerned with integrating our standards that we already talked about from the central team on topics such as securities as intuitively as possible into the solution offered in order to really relieve the developers of this part of work. And what we see now, being all in on GitHub makes it way easier for our developers, because they don't need to switch tools, as Rob said, and can instead focus on really delivering value. And they have one platform and one UI where they can find almost everything, like the source code, the workflows, the issues, all in one place and are undistracted by routine tasks. So yeah, that's really cool for us. And as an example, example, like when I remind myself by moving completely from Jenkins to GitHub, we reduced our application lifecycle management span to 0, and we're able, as I already mentioned to you, Niroshan, to really create a new full-time position focusing on driving new opportunities with GitHub automation. So perhaps two features that our teams really love is, for one, is GitHub Actions. So with GitHub Actions, our platform team built and automated reusable workflows that can be used across various teams. And reusable workflows give them a standard way of working that they can easily manage, like by pushing their artifact repository and download it all in one place. And now the platform team can focus entirely on the overall deployment and testing workflow without having to deal with the implementation details of the various programming languages and Kubernetes APIs. So this also frees other development teams from needing to build their own workflows individually and saving valuable developer time. Like, speaking in numbers, what I've prepared is in total, this reduced the setup process for workflows from 4 hours to 5 minutes, or roughly by 98%. So overall, we estimate this has saved us around 225 days in wait time since implementing these reusable workflows. That's really a cool thing for us.
That's amazing. I just want to highlight that point. Reusable workflows has helped your business cut down something that was taking 4 hours down to 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
A 98% improvement in productivity, which in a time like this where we're trying to get more out of everyone and help people be more productive, that's an amazing statistic. So congratulations on that, and thank you for sharing.
But then it also goes back to focusing on the developer workflow, because they want to have fast feedback. That's what we learned in the whole DevOps movement over the years. Fast feedback is the part where it matters, and everywhere you can make it faster, that can really help. So that is one of the big wins there as well. One thing that also came to mind, I know we're at time, but I still wanted to add that point, is that I really appreciate the way that GitHub looks at these things, because they are usually engineers themselves as well, where they start building these things. And they focus a lot on noise reduction in there. We've seen so many times that somebody comes in with a security tool, let's enable that, and now you have 700 findings to handle. That's not to get corporate buy-in from anyone. So having that mindset in there as well, and we see it continuously with whatever GitHub is doing is making sure that we keep the noise down. So get the true positives in there and not so much the false positives that we have in it.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Rob. So I know we're at time, so I really appreciate everyone that's staying on. Just to let you all know, there is a survey link that just got posted in the public chat. So we'd really love to hear your feedback on how the session is going, or what you thought of the session in case you have to drop off. But what I'd like to do is just come back to our panel now. And if there was one thing that you could have the audience walk away from today, from the session, and they could bring to their business, what would that be? And maybe Andra, if you can kick us off on this closing, please.
Sure. Thank you. So my one key takeaway is that, with GitHub's help, we can see how easily we can integrate security tooling right now. So it's increasingly easy to integrate everything. But the constant communication and feedback from engineering teams is the crucial bit that is needed to create a security mindset in the business. So we're not here as a security team to say no. We're here to work with all of our engineers.
Amazing communication. Rob, how about yourself?
For me, it's that focus on realizing security cannot be an afterthought anymore. You cannot centralize that somewhere and say, you need to make sure that we as a company are more secure. Bring that back to the developers. They are the people who can actually fix these things and even find them sometimes, because we are doing complicated things most of the time as well. So that is why I really like to focus on the developer workflow. They're the folks who can fix that. If you keep them happy and ingrain this in their experience as much as you can, in a good way, with keeping the noise down, for example, then yeah, that is where the focus should be. So security cannot be an afterthought. It has to be ingrained in your process.
Love it. Security is a part of your process. And Pascal, to close us out here.
Yeah, perhaps two things. So on the one hand, the consistent implementation of this central service approach to relieve the development teams of tasks like general security tasks, as I mentioned, with the reusable workflows. And on the other side, what I always see is in numerous cases that to value good organizational design and decisive buy-in from top management, in my eyes, crucial to the comprehensive success of such optimization measures. And in order also to assert the project or the endeavor against resistance from all parts of the company, because that's, to be honest, quite blank, will happen, and you have to be prepared for this. And it's just, you need this, in my eyes, this decisive buy-in from top management that's also interested in these things and really want to push it. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Pascal. I want to take a moment again to thank our wonderful panelists, Andra, Pascal, Rob. Thank you all for taking your time to share with the community here. I think it's been really insightful for myself. I picked up some great phrases that I'm going to use in my presentations later as well. And I also love how you prioritize bringing security and development teams together and just, taking this incremental step. So I really appreciative of the time and knowledge sharing that you've done. Big thank you to our audience out there. Thank you for participating. I know we've run a little bit over, so if you're still there, thank you so much for taking the time to join the session. And as I mentioned, there's a feedback link that we put in the chat. And also, just if you like our session today and there are more sessions that you're interested in, then we have the security session. So the fireside chat that you've just been a part of, and then we have the forums that are happening later today, and then we have the events on collaboration which are happening tomorrow. So really look forward to seeing you all at those sessions, and thank you once again for all of your time. It's great. And again, if you have any feedback to share, we'd love to hear it. We're here for you. These sessions are meant to help you all bring leadership and thoughts to your businesses. So thank you all very much again. It's been my pleasure to host this session, and thank you once again to our panelists. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.